What is up, guys? You got NotTheWorst here, bringing another Black Desert online video, and today we're taking a look at the final round, well, currently the final round of PvE damage buffs on the global labs that will begin going to live servers starting with Korea on the 8th and sequentially from there. We do have a devs note in the global labs that talks about this was the last round for the damage portion of it, and they're going to immediately begin working on what I'm now calling phase 2, which is going to be changes other than just damage in the PvE realm. That's going to be things like ease of operation, stability, the range that their attacks are hitting, overall attack range, how powerful the character is individually, like characters' attack power. I assume they're talking about something like base rates and things like that. Then reduction of hits, type hits they're doing, evasion rate, everything other than damage that we're going to see in the next phase. So that means a couple of things for us. Number one, you're not going to be really able to draw a ton of conclusions from just damage numbers alone. I would suspect there may be some instances where skill rotations get modified a bit, even just from the damage changes alone. Some classes also got cooldown changes already that are going to be impactful there. Dark Knight Awakening looks like it's getting shaken up pretty well after some additions that were made today, but we'll get to that in a little bit later. So it's going to be a little bit difficult to say who's the winner and loser out of these types of things. Currently doesn't really look like there's any losers, but be prepared for that. I also imagine, and they kind of touch on it here a bit as well, that they are aware of it. The second adjustment, because you're changing things like protection and ease of operation, it's going to also impact PvP more so than just these PvE damage buffs have already, because there are some that do. So that's going to be a thing. They're aware of it, and they're immediately after going to start working on PvP. I don't know. I guess they're kind of setting it up so that if they break it, because they probably will, they're letting you know they're going to try and fix right away, and also that other adjustments are going to still be made while they're kind of working on this. So here we have the spreadsheet, and I'll share this in the description below if you want to check this out for you. I also posted this up on Reddit, so maybe you came from there and then check the video. I'm going to link this video into that post too, now that we've got it up. So what you're looking at here, it's important to note a couple of things. Number one, a big number doesn't necessarily mean that it is the best buff for it, right? Just because you see a big percentage number or a big damage number, that doesn't necessarily indicate that. Number of skills buffed also in the same scenario. We have to consider that different classes use different skills in PvE. There's very likely skills that were buffed that you don't even use on your class in PvE. You might now maybe it's been buffed in such a way that the damage makes sense where you kind of have to put it in there. But more importantly, because we're getting the second wave of changes, I suspect nearly all, most if not all, PvE rotations are going to be modified, because I don't really see how protection changes are going to exist alongside all of the other sorts of changes, evasion buffs, accuracy buffs, that sort of thing, without that modifying it. So damage isn't the only thing. And then secondly, just because these numbers are big doesn't mean that that's the best. I talked about this in the last video, but if you didn't, where we covered the first couple rounds of these updates, but if you didn't catch that, a great example of this would be things like Ranger. If you look at this, right, the average damage increase of the buffed skills. This means on average, the skills that they buffed, which was 8 of them, they were buffed roughly 48 total damage, which was 40% or 41% increase. If we look at the Ranger Succession, it had 5 skills that were buffed with an average of 36.4% increase. However, so these percentages aren't super far off from each other, right? However, 36% increase on those 5 skills is only a 1200 damage increase on it. This is because the number of the types of skills you're getting are going to have varying ranges of damage. An example you could think of is if you have one class, let's say Ranger Awakening gets one skill buffed, and it's buffed by 500% damage, right? Well, the rest of its kit is completely untouched. Maybe that one hits for an absurd amount of damage now, and that's great and all, but if the Succession version then gets, let's say, every single skill in its kit buffed by 50% damage, you're going to see a very huge number here, right? You'd have one skill modified, 500% damage increase. You'd have an astronomical number here, right? And you'd be like, oh my God, Ranger Awakening is insane. Well, actually, compared to everything else, it'd be trash because it only has one skill that was buffed and everybody else has multiples in it, right? And then if every single skill on Ranger Succession is buffed by 50%, you'd only see a 50% number here. You'd see probably around a 3,000 to 4,000 number here, just based on what most of them are. For that, and you'd be like, oh, this is way behind Ranger Awakening. So big numbers there don't necessarily mean that class got the best buffs out of it. This is just kind of something that gives you like an idea at a glance of what it was. And then, of course, we have the individual classes broken down in tab. I'm going to move these to alphabetical moving forward, so keep that in mind. But for now, I just put them in the order so that the ones that are brand new to the sheet today with the November 3rd update are on the list, so we can just kind of briefly cover each of those. I'm not going to delve into each and every single skill with it. We'll just kind of take a look at some notable ones and some of the other changes. There are other changes already implemented that are non-damage, and you'll see here, like on Berserker, I've begun to notate those as well, and this is more so getting this category kind of ready in preparation for the Phase 2 updates, because then we're really going to see some cooldown changes and things like that. Over time, I'll kind of clean this up and refine a little. Also, feel free to be on the lookout for some typos, or if I messed up any formulas or anything. I did this at like 4 o'clock in the morning this morning, so there's some chances I screwed some stuff up, so feel free to call that out so I can fix it, and we can have a nice kind of compendium moving forward. So let's go ahead and start taking a look with Zerker, the first one on the list that was new today. We can see the succession getting some notable increases here, and honestly, I think this is more impactful. Obviously, damage is good, but everybody's getting damage. Starting to see things like this more and more. There are some other classes that got cooldown changes with it. We see these all reduced. Ancient Wave being a 15-second cooldown, Devastation on 10 instead of 12 is pretty big. Here's an example of what I was talking about with like big number here. Big number always good doesn't necessarily mean that. The damage on Headbutt has been doubled, but again, it's not like it's dealing a mass amount of damage to begin with on the grand scale of things. So I don't know Zerker, because I'm not filthy and would never play one, but I don't know if that skill is used in PvE as is. Maybe it wasn't, maybe it is, and it's nice to have a little bit extra damage. Then when you consider things like Raging Thunder, for instance, only getting a 10% buff, which is only an increase of 7,500 additional damage, you can see how a 10% buff on this completely dwarfs a 100% buff on this in terms of the amount of damage that's being increased. Something to note too with Awakening, this was the only skill out of the entire set for any class that we saw this. They reduced the damage reduction from 40% to 60, or the damage reduction amount in PvP from 40% to 64%. Not that I'm complaining about it, but they didn't do this for any other classes as far as PvP damage. I don't know if they just are foreseeing things that they're going to shake up moving forward or what have you. For which we only have Succession that is touched here. Awakening was not, as they deemed that one in pretty good shape. I don't know if moving forward there will be other changes to Awakening other than damage, but as we see it, damage is not getting changed. She gets some pretty good incremental buffs across the board. The numbers aren't super high compared to some other ones, but again, that's not necessarily speaking towards what the performance is going to be. She does notably get a couple of cooldown reductions, a couple seconds lowered on Focus, and 1 second lowered on Magic Arrows. Wiz gets the same treatment identically on their shared skills, and then his Magic Arrows is a little bit weaker than Witch, as it always has been. He does get Prime Focus reduced to 9 seconds as well, and then Prime Destruction getting it improved to link more smoothly. We do get Awakened buffs for the Wizard, and he does get some pretty significant ones. He's on the upper end for the amount and the overall percentage. Most, as you'll see, it float around that like 3 to 4k damage increase on each skill is the ballpark for most of them, and then the percentage being right around 30% in some cases. But once again, that doesn't necessarily mean that even all of these skills are used in PvE or what they will be moving forward. So we'll just have to see. Striker picks up some pretty modest numbers in this Succession as far as just damage increases numbers per skill. His weren't already super high compared to most. I've not played Striker, so that was kind of interesting to see. And then these numbers are honestly some of the lowest for it, but again, we'll see how that actually plays out within a PvE kit. He does get some extra HP recovery, both added and then an Awakening set increased from what they were previously. The Awakening set getting much more significant damage number increases there. You can see top end, again, 155% increase on Flow Crosswind. However, it's still a very low damage number to start with, so it's not really that insane for that particular one. Archer doesn't have Succession or Awakening. This one was much easier to chart out, thankfully. So we do see some really significant damage numbers here. I don't know a super bunch about this class, but Full Grand Bloom, the fact that this number alone, if I recall correctly, is the highest base damage number before any other adjustments put in. Base damage number of any class that I saw. I might be slightly off, but this skill's insane, so okay, that's a lot of damage. But yeah, Archer. Glissade gets an 80% damage increase, which is actually pretty significant for this skill. It wasn't doing like terrible damage before, but it's definitely doing relevant damage after the change there. Shai, everybody's favorite, gets pretty nice damage changes as well. These ones are at these 20 to 30% ranges are a very high damage number increase. The reason for that is these base damage numbers, maybe not necessarily try this, are so high to start with. Obviously, 20% of 40 is just drastically higher than 35% of 15, so that's how math works. Guardian, we get only the Awakening. Succession is not getting damage buffs. Again, I don't know at this time if that will be getting any of the other Phase 2 changes for Succession Guardian, but damage they've deemed is relatively okay for now. It getting the biggest amounts of percent increase on God Incinerator, and because that one has a very high base damage to start with, that's also the highest damaging skill. But these are fairly decent numbers in that 3 realm, kind of across the board, other than the outlier God Incinerator. Nova, also one of the classes where Succession is not getting any damage buffs. Again, we'll have to wait and see if they get any of the Phase 2 changes. This one had some other things going on, since Awakening Nova has more than just raw damage. Some of these are up high, some of these are up low, and even some that had like decent-ish changes, or decent-ish base damage to start with. They're not getting pushed up extremely high with only like 3% change, but there's also the Excel mechanic, and obviously the damage modifiers are different for those, so you can see how those change out. She got a lot of HP recovery removed and essentially reallocated to other skills. So the Excel version and regular version of Fletch have it removed, as well as Lunge, and then these replaced on Star's Call and the Excel version and Slicing Ring as well. So those were adjusted. Her Frozen Ring gets a minus 20 DP for 5 seconds, coming up from 10 DP for 10 seconds. She does get a cooldown reduction on Excel Star's Call as well, and they did change the Star Breath recovery for it, so I went ahead and threw that in here just for those Awakened players that were kind of interested for that. Obviously not massive changes, but the recovery is somewhat relevant for what got changed. Drak currently has no other non-damage updates, but don't worry, Drak fans, we still have Phase 2 that will be coming out starting next week, I believe. So we'll look forward to maybe seeing some of those, but as is, both the Succession and Awakening forms did not pick up any non-damage updates just yet. You can see that Succession gets some moderate damage number increases on the total. She already hits pretty heavy, so that's not really surprising to see. I did want to note these numbers here are actually calced to the full Ion charged. I don't know. I played Suck Drak for about a month for a while to do some videos on it early on, and then again another month later. In no circumstance was I using non-Ion charge. That could have changed since then, so if you guys think it might be useful, I guess I can throw in the non-charged versions of these, but to my knowledge, you're not really doing that if you're maximizing PvE. I don't know that that's still the case. Awakened Drak obviously has a plethora of skills. She has the most changed out of anyone at, I believe, 15, or she has 17. She's got 15. I believe that's the most out of anyone's. Ninja might be a little bit higher. And that's not surprising because she has so many freaking skills in her kit that she uses. Just to note, I have the H indicating the Hex Blood and D indicating Dragon Blood forms because her skills are the same names within those. The biggest percentage increase we see on Cloud Strife, which goes from moderate damage to in the realm. This one actually got juiced pretty good, all things considered. It picks up an extra 6k damage. And you can kind of see she's got a lot of skills in that 4 to 6k range, and then a lot that are in the like 1 to 2, which balances her out to around 4, that being the average damage she picks up on each of these skills in that ballpark. Maegu, we get some tweaks. This is Awakening only. Again, Succession Maegu is one of those classes that will not be getting damage buffs, and once again, I don't know if that means they won't be getting any Phase 2 buffs for it. I suspect that she will in both specs, but we'll have to see. Emberclaw Finale picks up a DP plus 20, DP plus 20 for 10 seconds, and then she gets some HP recovery on both Twirling Fox Flare and the Flow Fox Flare Encore. Her damage buffs, I was expecting to see more for her, to be quite honest with you. I'm not saying it's necessarily bad, but these were some of the most modest when you look at the actual damage number being increased, she's on the lower end for that amount. In some cases, it almost feels insignificant compared to what some of the classes are getting. That may not be the case, but we'll have to see. But I'm just saying, on a skill like this, where you're only upping 5%, it's picking up 1,200, and you see a lot of other classes that are using some of their bread and butter, like big hitting skills, are picking up 30% on these, which, you know, on a skill like that is a big chunk of damage, that 3 to 4k range, more what we're used to seeing. But we don't get that on Awakening. Maegu, again, they'll continue monitoring, and we'll see if this works for her. I don't know that she necessarily needed a ton of damage anyways for it. I was just kind of surprised to see these numbers. Hopefully they have a lot more planned for phase 2. I think she could use some tweaking in her other things that are non-damage to really get her on par with the other classes. A couple other things I wanted to note: there were a few additional changes to a few classes that were previously buffed in the last 2 global wave patches. So if you saw the last video and saw some changes, there were a few that got added, and those were Kuno, Lahn, DK, Ninja, Valk, and Tamer. So those got a couple added. Kuno, you can see Prime Shadow Explosion, Prime Wheel of Wrath are now added into the buff list, as well as added in some of her non-damage updates to this as well, getting modified. So add those into the list. Lahn, they went back and redid the damage for basically everything they did last week, and then they also added a couple more into that being Nether Flower, Blooming Nether Flower, and Blade Dance. Those were not previously buffed, and they are now, and the numbers were all increased on these as well. She has the highest number of damage increase, and a very high number for percentage increase, not the highest for it. Again, these numbers can be misleading, so make sure you're paying attention to what's what on it. But pretty significant damage across the board. What this tells me is that was Lahn underperforming in damage before in succession. Kind of seems like it, because they did give a lot of her. She doesn't use a lot of skills to start with, so the percentage of like usable PvE kit, and then also some of these skills maybe coming into the PvE kit being even more of a possibility. Once again, we won't know till it fleshes out the full phase 2 of these buffs to kind of see what things look like, how it'll impact. But definitely interesting to see that they added those in. Ninja picked up a couple of skills as well that were not previously buffed, those being Shadow Slash, Evasive Shuriken, and Shuriken Malice. So those all getting decent chunks of damage increase. Well, not really. They were all kind of low, but it was still something. I suppose they just decided it needed more. Did he get more skills than Drak? No, he's one shorter than Drak. Okay, wasn't sure who had more. Then we have Tamer getting a few in both Succession and in Awakening that were added in that were not on the previous update. Bolt Wave, Jolt Wave, and Throat Burn all getting some damage increases as well. Let's fix that formatting because that looks wild real quick while we're recording, because that's how we do it. There we go. And then Awakening also getting Legendary Beast Dance, Legendary Beast Dance Echo, and Celestial Slam all getting damage increases as well that were not previously there. She does have quite a few new non-damage buffs that were included along with today's update to go with it. And then last but not least, and I mean, you could say I'm biased because I'm a DK main, I think this is probably the most significant updates out of the classes that had already gotten buffs before. I mentioned in last week's video, and I used it previously as an example for, just because it has a big number doesn't necessarily mean it's that impactful. I used DK as that example last week. Both Succession and Awakening had roughly a 30% damage increase for the average of the skills that were buffed. But in that scenario, Succession DK had virtually 90% of its kit buffed, just leaving out like Wheel of Fortune and Twilight Dash, and every other skill got buffed, whereas Awakening, who needs to be using and should be using, especially Unveiled Dagger and that sort of thing, out of the pre-Awaken kit, it only got about 60-ish or maybe some change percentage of its Awakening kit buffed, and they just didn't buff the other Awakening skills. And that was kind of surprising. Something I said was it would either need like lower cooldowns, or they would also need to or also buff some of the absolute skills to go with it to flesh that out. Well, we sort of got exactly that, and some of these were on the wish list in general. They added Spirit Hunt, Soul Snatch, Dark Nebula, and Cluster Despair to the damage buffs that were not previously on there, so that's pretty cool to see. And then on top of that, this possibly being even bigger than necessarily just the raw damage, although that Cluster Despair looks insane if you're getting 100% crit rate on that guy. The Spirit Legacy and Seed are both 7-second cooldown now, as well as the Flow Seed, and then Dark Nebula's picking up some HP recovery, which isn't nothing on top of that. That's kind of the theme for some of these things. They did add Grip of Grudge. The HP recovery has been boosted to 150. I believe it was 80 with the last week of buffs. So there's potential here to get some pretty heavy modifications to how this class plays in PvE moving forward. I think you're still going to be using that pre-awaken just because passing up Unveiled Dagger is not a great idea in general, but the quote-unquote filler skills are still going to be slightly unappealing because of the animation speeds, and you might be using pre-awaken, but again, we don't know what other changes are going to be made. Maybe some of those skills are going to be sped up, maybe they'll be modified entirely, maybe there'll be new skills, who knows. So we'll just have to kind of see how things go. So there you have it for a little overview of what's going on. So feel free to leave any comments or anything. Or like I said before, if you do see any typos and stuff, please let me know. Or if I missed a formula or something for damage numbers, let me know so I can get it fixed for you. I'll continue updating this as we get global lab updates for PvE stuff. So like things like this, I'll keep fleshing out into non-damage updates. I'm not necessarily super happy with the display I have for these, but I was just kind of jotting them down and trying to get the damage numbers in. So that'll be something to work on over time. But yeah, so that's gonna be it for this video. Be sure to like it if you did enjoy it. Be sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel. And if you would like to catch me playing live, be sure to click on my Twitch page. There's a link in the description down below. You can jump on over there, drop a follow so you get notifications for that as well. With that said, that's going to be it for this one. I want to thank everybody for watching, and I will see you next time.